It's my great pleasure to introduce to our listening audience Marty and Vicky Burlsworth, the family of the legend Brandon Burlsworth, the greatest walk-on in college football history. Just a great honor to speak with you both today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, John. It's our honor, pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Hey, so I was introduced to Brandon's legacy. Actually, I remember Brandon in, I believe is it 99 when Michigan played Arkansas in was it the Citrus Bowl?
The Citrus Bowl in Orlando, yes.
In the Citrus Bowl. And he was an absolute dominant force. I remember hearing his story. I just remember him from back then. And then the movie, I got a phone call from my brother Joe, and he said, "Hey, have you seen this movie about the greatest walk-on in college football history?" And I couldn't remember Brandon's name at the time. And he said, "Hey, it's on Netflix. By the way, the movie is called Greater, and it's on Netflix. It's a must-see for the folks." We're going to dig into it on this podcast and really talk about kind of Brandon's legacy. It's an unbelievably powerful story. But my brother called me and said, "Have you seen the movie?" And I said, "Well, I remember the guy." And then when I watched the movie and saw the legacy unfold and the tragic ending, it just really hit home. And we just reached out to you folks and said, "We'd love to have you on our podcast and really talk about Brandon's legacy." So the first question that I have for you, Marty, is, you have been really out there keeping Brandon's legacy and memory alive. Why was it important for you to make sure that others knew Brandon's story?
Yeah, that's a really good question, John. I mean, Brandon worked so hard for so long. I mean, I remember this little guy trying to play baseball, wasn't a very good athlete. I coached him as he got a little bit older. I was a junior high baseball coach, just in the summer, nothing professional, but had my team that I'd had for years, and I knew the struggles. I mean, not just me, our family, people in our hometown of Harrison, Arkansas, knew the struggles, knew the trials, and all the everything he went through. And after his tragic accident, after the NFL draft, we just couldn't let that end. At that time, he had done too much and been such a great role model, not only for kids, but for everyone, for just a tremendous can-do attitude and believing in yourself and having a strong faith and working hard. So that's we were there on the when it was all taking place all through those years, and we just couldn't let it end. That one.
We're really thankful that you didn't let it end. And I just think with Brandon's story, I don't think it would have ended. I think that his legacy was meant to go on and on and on. And Vicky, on that note, you work with the Brandon Burlsworth Foundation, and you're a big part of, you both are a big part of that. But Vicky, I'd like your perspective on what do you think most resonates for folks with Brandon's story from your point of view?
Good question. I think one of the things is that Brandon, I mean, we all need a role model. We just need somebody to look up to. And sometimes you want that role model that you can have your children look up to. But Brandon came from, struggling and overweight when he was younger. And he just decided in his will and his faith that he was going to transform himself. And I think any of us want to think that tomorrow is going to be a better day. And we need to get our act together and get back in our faith, and that we can change to be that person that we want to be. And Brandon did that. So to me, he's just an example to everybody of somebody that was the ultimate I can do it. He didn't had let his circumstances determine what he was going to do.
Yeah, I heard a quote. I don't know if it came from Brandon or it was about Brandon. Nothing given, everything earned.
Yeah.
And when you think about, for our listeners, worldwide listeners, he's known as the greatest walk-on in college football history. And let me just explain what that means. What that means is in college athletics, there are athletic scholarships. And the story goes that Brandon was born and raised to play for Arkansas, and he wanted to be a member of the Arkansas Razorback football team. And he wanted that ever since he was a little boy. And he decided, and he's a late bloomer. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about that, Marty, in just a second. But he's a late bloomer. So there were no scholarships available. I want you to think about that. Everybody else is getting recruited to a school, to a company, to what have you, and you're not one of them that's getting recruited to your ideal place that you want to go to. And it wasn't that Brandon wasn't a good football player. There were plenty of places for him to be able to use his talents, but he was so focused and determined that he decided to walk on, which means join a football team without an athletic scholarship. And the rest is, and he did that at Arkansas, and the rest is just an incredible story. So Marty, what I'd like to talk a little bit about, we'll kind of break this down into kind of 4 segments. Brandon's determination, his impact on others, from a coaching point of view, since you have kind of a coaching background and you interacted with the coaches. And then we'll talk about, Vicki, the legacy that's really been created and the beautiful job that you all are doing with the foundation and Brandon's legacy. But let's dig in a little bit to the determination and focus and desire. And Marty, I believe that you're the older brother. You're Brandon's older brother, and there's a significant kind of age difference. And in looking at the story, how really blessed I think Brandon was to have you in his life as a father figure. And would you mind just kind of talking about the focus, the desire, the resiliency, the late bloomer? Just tell us a little bit about Brandon's early life.
Right. Yeah. He, when we speak, to youth groups or elementary schools, I always stress to them that Brandon was just like anyone else. He wasn't a future All-American at that time. You didn't see that at all. You didn't see an athlete at all, really. You really didn't see that work ethic. Early on, he, just like any kid, he was basically, he would make excuses for why did I strike out, or I'm striking out, or, somebody else's fault. So he and I would have those talks, and I would tell him, I said, as long as, and this is, when he's 10 or 11 years old. So, keeping that in consideration, I tell him, as long as it's somebody else's fault, that's not going to get any better. Mm-hmm. Well, at that age, I don't think that he didn't want to hear that, too much. Well, when he got up old enough to be on my baseball team, 13 through 15 year old, but he would always come out and practice with us. One day he's a little chunky. I wanted to run sprints with us after practice, and he did. And there was a work ethic there. He started getting more determined, and I do not take any credit whatsoever for what he became. But when he got up into our league or in our age group, he knew that I would just tell him, say, you're going to have to do right, either lose a little weight, we're going to lose a little weight, we're going to work out, or we won't play. I'm not going to play very much on the next game. Always lost the weight, worked hard. Vicki remembers many nights with in our driveway with the car lights on, and I'm catching him, and we're trying to make a picture out of him, and you say in baseball, I've got to break down your mechanics and change them to get you some good mechanics, because your mechanics are wrong. He had no mechanics, so we didn't have to worry about any of that. We had a clean slate, but he worked, just really put in. I mean, we would be out there freezing temperatures all year long. And then by the next year, he made the All-Star team and made the World Series team as a pitcher. And baseball was really big. That has always been my favorite sport. It was actually Brandon's, but we love football too. But around that time, once he, you could see the work ethic kicking in, and I didn't have to push him. When he was a little guy, I was really just like it is in the movie when the lawn's not mowed. People ask, "Is that real?" Yeah, that was real, because he'd just be sitting on the couch eating chips or laying in the floor. And I thought, man, I guess I felt like a 9-year-old should, have some type of work ethic. I don't know why. At my age, I guess at that time I knew everything, but I didn't. But he sure showed me.
So what's amazing about his story, though, is, and your all story, is that Brandon. I think Brandon, growing up in a difficult environment, and certainly wasn't given a lot, and but was surrounded by love, which is an awesome part of the story, and you guys played a big part of that. But he's growing up kind of a normal kid, and then something happens. Is there, Vicky? You watch this, and you watch the interaction with Marty and Brandon. Is there anything that you can remember as like something that flipped a switch for him, something that changed from an intense motivation and desire? Is there anything you guys can put your fingers on that one?
When we go back and look about it, because he's as awe-inspiring to us as he is the rest of the world. We just got to live with him and be around him 24/7. But he was always wonderful mom. Dad wasn't around as much, alcoholic, a great guy. You would love him to meet him if he's passed on now, but it wasn't there. And so when he started getting involved in church, you kind of start seeing that mind. And I remember one time we had him in, we were at my mother's house, and he was showing out. I think he was probably maybe 6 or 7. And I said, Brandon, would God want you to do that? And you could just see his mind working, and he stopped. I mean, he just really understood that his faith was starting to develop, those early years. And then later on, as far as football is concerned, his best friend was invited to the All-Star game. And so Brandon went to that. And I think that is when it kicked in that he wanted to do that, that his best friend was a year older. And so, I think it's just like the rest of us. Things happen that to me wouldn't have made any effect, but to Brandon into the stage where he was at in his life right then, that was the pivot that God needed to push him toward where he wanted him to be.
Mm.
So he was.
How about you, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. When he attended that first high school All-Star game for his friend, that kicked it in. But, I think a good lesson to learn from this is, Brandon came from very, very humble beginnings. And I think we all look sometimes for, a head start. And what's so inspiring about Brandon's story is, there was no head start. There was no, he came, with just really with about very little chance of making it, which for a lot of us would make us want to quit, or we would quit. I don't have the scholarship or whatever that might be, or whatever career we're in. Someone's got a head start on me, so I'm going to mail it in, but not with Brandon. It just, when he had a big growth spurt between his sophomore and junior year in high school. Now, when I had him in baseball all the time, I didn't see that, and I was with him. We weren't in the same household, but we were with him all the time. We didn't notice it till this was before you worked out all summer, like high schools do now.
Yeah.
For the most part. You're in the weight room all summer. Well, it wasn't that way back in the early 90s. But his high school coach, Tommy Tice, pulled me aside. He said, "What have you been feeding that boy?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's grown 3 or 4 inches this summer." I didn't notice that. So, but also at that same time, it seemed like something mentally with Brandon clicked. It took on a physical growth, but a mental growth, and a vision. He had a vision.
Yeah.
I think football I could, maybe continue to play outside of high school. Now he didn't play hardly any. He stood on the sideline his sophomore year. Junior year, he split time with a senior. Now he was a high school senior, 17 years, graduated high school, 17 years old.
Yeah.
But his senior year, I've gone back and looked at a lot of film. My goodness. I mean, I knew he was dominant, but when you go back and played on both sides of the ball, but you had to game plan on the other side and then he'd still run you down so quick, so fast. And this was someone that, 2 or 3 years earlier, never saw the field and was
amazing,
very uncoordinated, but just worked himself, just putting in the work when no one's looking. No glory there, but that's where the gains are made.
It's an amazing story because when you look at, he's like the classic example of a late bloomer. And I love his story because like today in high school athletics, and, these kids are declaring now in the 8th grade, and, they're getting scholarships in the 8th and 9th grade. And you just have people that are late developers. And I had forgotten that Brandon he graduated as a senior at like 17 years old. And so let's talk about, he shows up at Arkansas, his dream, and Arkansas was, they kind of had a plan with the people that they recruited, and they allowed him to come and walk on. And so now he's there. And one thing that struck me in the story, and I'd like to talk a little bit about impact. So Brandon had an incredible impact, not only for himself with his focus and drive and determination, but he also had an impact on those around him. And the movie Greater on Netflix. I highly, highly recommend it for those that are listening. It did a really, really good job of kind of the impact that Brandon had on those around him. And I know, Marty and Vicky, you've known his teammates for probably a couple of decades now, and just describe a little bit of what you guys witnessed and what you hear. Those people that lined up and played with Brandon. So in the beginning, he comes out, he's out of shape, not out of shape, but not in ready shape to compete at a major university in probably the toughest competitive level in college football in the SEC. And so people are kind of looking at that, maybe like, why is this kid here? And then in a very short period of time, he earns a scholarship in his first year. And in a very short period of time, he is not different. People are migrating towards him. So tell me your experiences of hearing the stories of how people kind of migrated towards the humility and the difference that Brandon was displaying.
Right. Yeah. He very quiet. And we're talking about he came in out of shape. Basically, that's correct. He was told in recruiting visits, and these were recruiting visits that maybe I had to make a phone call to get the visit, but they did invite us over and took an interest in him. And but it was going to be eventually it's going to be a walk-on, and then eventually as a preferred walk-on. And he was told, just like it says in the movie, that you're not big enough. And so once again, he grew, but that was in the wrong way. He gained weight, but it was not the right kind of weight. I remember that summer he and I would go to the weight room a lot, but he was just putting on the wrong kind of weight. And once again, I did not realize that since I was with him a lot. Coach Tice, before he showed up or went over to Fayetteville, Arkansas, home of the University of Arkansas, said, boy, he's soft. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, man, he's gained weight. And I said, yeah, they said, no, that's not the kind of weight they wanted. I said, oh, okay. So, and I didn't even notice it. So went over and was challenged by the coaching staff that he had to get that weight that he'd put on off. And that was a struggle. I can remember many times I talked to him every night at 10 minutes after 10. And he said, I'm on what the trainer called green label in the athletic dining room, which meant I'm basically eating salads. It's got a green label on it. You can eat it. Other than that, no. So that wasn't a lot of fun, but not everything's fun.
But what's amazing about the story is they told him, said, if you want to play here, you got to show up and be over 300 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so he listens to exactly what they told him to do. They didn't tell him how to put the 300. It's not like
That's
he was
right.
cutting a corner. He's like, okay, I got to be 300 pounds. What I love about his story, though, is they said, okay, then he shows up. He says, I did what you told me to do. And for coaches listening and for
Mm-hmm.
business coaches listening, you don't only have to tell somebody what you need them to do. You gotta make sure they know how to do it, and then you got to keep in communication with them to make sure that it's going correctly. And so he shows up. I think the number, I don't know, 20 or 30 pounds with the wrong body makeup, and the kid says, okay, they tell him, you got to change it. You got to lose the weight and then put it back on muscle. And the kid does it. So he did everything that they told him to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And just think about that. And I really haven't looked at it exactly like that, John, before, but he could have said right then, well, you told me to put the weight on. I did it. And now that's not good enough. That's not the way, he would do what his coaches asked of him because he believed in his coaches. He trusted his coaches. And Coach Tommy Tice, his high school coach, told the coaches at the university before he arrived, said, make sure whatever you tell him, that's what you want done because he will do it. He'll do what you say, but make sure it's exactly what you want him to do. Because if you say take a 2.5-inch step on a drill, it's going to be 2.5. If you want 3, you better say 3. He was going to be precise. But going back to the weight thing, he could have got discouraged right then and said, well, I'm done. You told me to put the weight on, but he did not listen to his coaches, took it off, and then transformed himself within a year and was, totally different. In fact, looking back about a year later, any of the photos we've got of him around that time period before he went to university, Mom would have him out like on display high school graduation. He's like, put that away. He did not like the way he looked. He did it. He was fine with it at the time, but once he had transformed, he's like, nah, I don't like the way I look. So I'm careful on what we share on our social media and other things. I keep him in mind because I know some of those photos he would not be too crazy about. So we don't put it. He's a big old boy, but it's not the right way.
So let's stay on this topic of coaches. I know that in the movie there were wonderful stories, and you can't make them all. You can't get them all in a movie. But he was just blessed, in beginning with you guys and his mother, to have just great influences in his life. But the coaches that showed up, the high school coaches, the college coaches, and then the big theme that I really, really saw was, we have this concept that we talk about at Force Management of great leaders and great coaches have the ability to meet people wherever they are. And there are some examples of coaches that Brandon had, which met him wherever he was. And Brandon was willing to put in the work. They were willing to do the work with him, above and beyond what the other people were doing. And he's like the classic example of a diamond in the rough. And so diamonds in the rough, they have to be harvested. They have to be polished. And I was really struck in the story, in Brandon's story, but there were some great examples. And I know they were a conglomerate of many coaches and that kind of stuff, but he was pretty blessed to have people really notice that he was different. And I know he brought it to the table because he was different. He was humble. He was an incredible worker. But, in life and in business, sometimes that doesn't always get noticed. And for coaches out there and leaders out there, I want you to listen as Marty and Vicky just talk about some of the impactful coaches in Brandon's life that really saw the diamond in the rough and helped him take it to the next level. Could you guys comment on that?
I remember one of Brandon's best friends, one of the linemen, said that it bothers him that he does not remember Brandon the first year. Isn't that something?
Yes.
You assume he's really this giant that everybody, and then one of the linemen, who turns out to be one of his best friends, doesn't remember him. He was so quiet and putting in the work and doing it behind the scenes and wasn't looking for attention or trying to position himself. He was just focused. and
Vicky,
doing.
that gives me goosebumps. One of his best friends says he doesn't remember him. Somebody who goes on and becomes a two-time SEC, all SEC player, becomes a first-team All-American and gets drafted in the third round. That just gave me chill bumps. One of his best friends says, I don't remember him as a freshman.
Yeah.
Which means he completely transformed himself.
And we miss things if we're not looking for them, just like the coaches. Yeah. You got to look for, expect good things out of some people because they're going to surprise you.
Wow, that just gave me chill bumps. Marty, your comments about some of the coaches.
Yeah, Brandon had, blessed to have a lot of great coaches. We've talked about before, John, but he's one thing about it, when I think they really took to Brandon, one thing, he obviously wasn't a big talker, super humble, but when you see someone that's willing to put in the work, even when it's not paying off, here in Arkansas, those that aren't familiar with the Razorbacks, we have no professional teams in Arkansas. We have another Division I school in the state, and other than that, we've got smaller schools. But Razorbacks are everything. Razorbacks, it's a statewide pride. There's only it's a one state school. I mean, it's just that's it. Everything's Razorbacks. You can be at smaller schools. On the weekend, maybe you've got a student at one of the smaller schools, and we were at university last weekend talking about this, and the talk in the stands, if the Hogs are playing at the same time, if people in the stands, what's the score? Even though they're at another game, they want to know, keep up with that Razorback score. But just back to Brandon's work ethic, when you see someone willing to sacrifice for no glory at all. Coach Houston Nutt, when he arrived on campus, and I can remember him telling the story about off-season workouts, going to the weight room. In Arkansas, everyone's got their battle cry, but we call the Hogs, Woo Pig Suey, call the Hogs. And one line that stuck out to me said, "There's not too many people calling the Hogs at 5:30 in the morning in the weight room."
Yeah, amen.
That's pretty powerful right there.
Amen.
We're not getting any result. We're not getting any glory, but man, we're working so that that day will come.
So Marty, when I first met you and Vicky, one of the stories that I just absolutely fell in love with, and I wanted to ask if it was true, because I know Hollywood's got to do some things to condense topics and keep people's attention, which I didn't think was at all necessary in Brandon's story. It turned out not to be necessary. So there's one story that I really loved. New coach comes in, Houston Nutt. The previous coach, they just made a coaching change. Houston Nutt comes into the field house at, I don't know, it's dark. So it's after everybody is gone. And he saw Brandon in there working on his technique. And he didn't really know Brandon that well yet. And so he's like, "Hey, who's in here? And how'd you get in here?" So Brandon asked for, permission to be able to do that. And Houston Nutt goes on and talks about that and the impact. This is the part that I really loved. So the new leader came in, had a decision, and probably said, "Hey, look, I got a couple of years to rebuild here, so I can go with the younger guys." And this was big impact for me when I was thinking about business. Brandon was so impactful to others around him that Houston Nutt saw that. So first of all, he had a firsthand experience with him after hours, like at night, when all the lights were off in the field house. And then he had a conversation with Brandon about Brandon saying, "Hey, let us finish what we started." And Houston Nutt's getting paid a lot of money. He's got a plan to come in. He's a new leader, and the leaders, I want you to just listen to this. See what's on the ground. See the leaders, the players that are on the ground. See the positive. Where are your pockets of influence, of positivity and resilience? And Brandon was one of those. And then they cut to the next scene. I don't want to give too much of the movie away, but this really impacted me. And then Brandon's leading the juniors and seniors, and in the first day of practice, and you could tell Houston Nutt's mind was just like, okay, we're going to go with these. We're going to let them finish what they started. And that almost never happens. So Marty, would you just kind of comment on that, that situation where a coach comes in, has a plan to probably do something, bring in his own recruits or what have you, looks on the ground, looks at the ground level, sees an incredible talent, an incredible leader, and decides to partner with that leader and make great things happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and he had every opportunity, because you've got our offensive line going into that year for that next season, 4 out of the 5 were seniors. So, and they were going into the 3rd year of starting, that being Grant Garrett, Chad Abernathy, Brandon, and Russell Brown. These guys were, everyone knew that we were right on the cusp of really being good. The year before, I can understand why they were looking at changing, because we were ranked near the end, or at the very bottom in rushing yards, which that's an insult to an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
You can't run the ball, which means you're not very physical. But, Coach Nutt saw what he had there, and saw that, what Brandon was, what he came from, and the impact and the influence that he had on his teammates, not only on his teammates, but all the coaches. And I mean, when any player out there knows that that's listening, that's played, college football, there's not very many that are in favor of a coaching change. And Brandon and that team was not in favor. Coach Ford was the head coach at the time, and he was just almost there. I mean, this team was going to be good, but we'd had 2 back-to-back 4-7 seasons. You just can't continue that. But Coach Broyles, our longtime legendary athletic director at Arkansas, really did a great job of bringing Houston. And I was excited about it once he got here, but I was just like everybody else. You want to, we know we're right at the, just right there about to make things happen. But Coach Nutt took what he had, took what those guys had put in all those years of work, and they knew one another. That offensive line was tight knit. They knew they didn't have to verbalize anything when the ball was snapped. They knew one another's tendencies, and worked as a unit. So and had tremendous success.
Such a great story, I think. And then they went on to, in the next 2 years, they competed for the SEC championship. They won one of them, right? Or did they win 2?
We won the West. We won the West a couple of times, and we tied for the West that Brandon's senior year, and that was just because of just terrible game at Tennessee, and not a terrible game, but a game we should have won. That is now in the legendary archives of the SEC, and they will replay that game on the SEC network here. And I try not to watch it.
Hey, I'm a Michigan fan, so I'm right there with you on some of those disappointments. But so let's just recap a couple of things. Coaches and leaders that are out there, when you first, get your assignment to go in and take over a new team, you get called in to turn around this team. Most people make plans without even meeting the players, without even understanding what's on the ground. And you could miss an opportunity to see a potential future All-American and an NFL draft pick, and have that person kind of help and partner with you to just, in force management terms, we call that level 4 players. Level 4 players have a massive impact on those around them. And then if you are a player, if you are an employee and you're listening to this story, I want you to think about Brandon's impact. A new coach comes in, and Brandon just kept doing what he was doing, offered his ability to be a great impact, a great influence for the new coaching staff, to be a help to the new coaching staff. You're not powerless if there's a coaching shift or a leadership shift. If you're doing the right things, things will be noticed. So, all right. So Vicki, I'd like to shift gears a little bit. And one of the things that we really love to do on this Audible Ready podcast is this story just um, really touched our hearts. Brandon's story is an incredible story. Your stories of the way that you are keeping Brandon's legacy alive and what you're doing for others is just awesome. And we're talking about Brandon Burlsworth, the most famous and greatest walk-on in college football history. They now have a Burlsworth trophy and some incredible names like Baker Mayfield and several others that are in the NFL. This is an award that's given out every year. Nothing given, everything earned mentality. Brandon went from walk-on to two-time All-SEC, first-team All-American, and a third-round draft choice for the Colts. What I also love is that in that time, and I believe he was at the time the only Razorback football player that earned his master's degree before his final game. And that just, when I read that, I think I read that a couple of days ago, I'm like, but of course, what an absolute incredible human being. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the foundation. Vicki, would you tell us a little bit about the foundation and what you all have been doing to keep Brandon's legacy alive? Obviously, we're talking about Brandon's legacy. I don't want to get into it too much. I'd really like you to see the movie. The movie just did an incredible job, but obviously Brandon is no longer here due to a tragic situation, which actually made me cry. I'm 58 years old and I watch movies, and that one made me cry. And let's talk a little bit about the legacy and the foundation. So first, talk about the Brandon Burlsworth. BrandonBurlsworth.org is where you can find information about the foundation. Rachel will put in the show notes a link. We'll actually have a landing page which will link right to the foundation. Let's dig into really what's most important is the legacy that Brandon created and what you guys are all doing with the foundation. So Vicki, tell us about it.
It won't surprise you at all to know that Marty and Brandon had already spoke about when he knew that the NFL was probably going to be a real possibility. They had already talked about helping children with the money that he had. He knew that he would make some difference. So Marty and Brandon had already sat and had conversations about, helping others. In the NFL, they always have the groups of the NFL players bring the groups of children to help them. Peyton Manning did that. That's just really common. And so they'd already talked about the idea of what we now call the Burls Kids, which is probably what we're more famous for just because we bring underprivileged children to Arkansas Razorback games and to Indianapolis Colts games. So that was an easy thing. And then football camps, we wanted to kind of get those Brandon's friends together so that a lot of this it was all in Brandon's memory, but it was out of our grief that we had to, Marty and I call it sink or swim. The first year was tough, and the movie kind of shows what happened that weekend. That was probably more our first year. We really struggled on how, as we'd live for this child. Marty and I went to every game, and Miss Barbara, the mom, every game. We missed 2 in 4 years. Yeah. I mean, we just had lived with these families and the players and what happened. So the Burls Kids, and then we realized that Brandon was so well known for those glasses. And so that's what we're really passionate about. Our summer push is to get our Eyes of a Champion, where we go in and kids in school that don't have insurance, don't have means to do it, but are still trying. They're still, they don't have government aid. They're trying, the families are trying. But so those kids in Arkansas, we put glasses on about 1,000 children a year through our Eyes of a Champion program. And we want to push that out. We're now in Louisiana, and we're trying to push that out nationwide. So that's,
I love that. And if you get a chance, Google a picture of Brandon. There's a story about how he was having some struggles in a game, and they got a pair of glasses for him, and he didn't have a lot of money to be able to he asked me to get, designer glasses, but he had to get the glasses also to be able to withstand the contact. They're probably the most famous athletic pair of glasses today. They're the thick black rim glasses, and 6'4", 310 pounds, would just knock your lights out wearing those glasses. It's just one of my favorite things about Brandon. But to our audience too, look, there's 75% of all people that are listening to this are wearing some type of corrective lenses. And so we would like to just, put a bug out there. We love doing these podcasts because we also point you in the direction of some wonderful foundations, because we know our community is really interested in serving others. And so can you talk a little bit more, the one that you guys have a big push on right now, it's called The Eyes of a Champion, and the concept and some of the things that people can do. Obviously, you can donate, and you can donate a pair of glasses. You can donate several pair of glasses. Can you talk about the different ways, even because you're trying to spread it across the country, even going to your optometrist? Could you talk to us a little bit about how we might be able to help in this endeavor of The Eyes of a Champion?
Our big push, we would like optometrists from around the country we ask optometrists to donate 20 exams per year, 20 exams and 20 pair of glasses, which they're probably doing anyway, because we all have that need to help others. This is just an organized program that's through the school nurse. And so we can track everyone that's getting them. And then the school nurse is following that child to make sure that the thing about children is that they don't know that they can't see. Brandon didn't know that he couldn't see individual leaves on the trees. He just thought that's the way it was. And young kids assume that they're stupid or not getting it, or I can't pick this up like everyone else. And so they need that push to be able somebody to make, identify the problem. And then if they can't afford them, to give them those glasses that they need. And so our push this summer is just for optometrists throughout the country to sign up. And then once you donate the exams and the glasses, we'll go into the school systems close by and let them know that those are available. It's an easy web-based, password protected through the nurses. And so we hope to not leave anybody out that needs glasses that wants them.
Awesome.
I'd like to add to that also.
Please, Marty, please.
The optometrists do a great job. I mean, these children need this. We like to say that the optometrists, allow them to see, but through the foundation, we like to help give them a vision of a brighter future. So every child, whether that's in Michigan, whether that's in California, we get out in these other states, every child that receives free eye care will get a copy of Brandon's book, the Eyes of a Champion book, so they can see and read about this guy that overcame all these obstacles, and that they also can do whatever they set their mind to.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that there's a book. So there's also a book called The Eyes of a Champion. I love that too.
Right, and there's a movie version of it out now, so that is available. I think it's on Amazon.
Fantastic.
On the website.
Fantastic.
So
I'll get that
added piece.
I'll get that for sure too. And Rachel will make sure that we put that in the show notes. So folks that are listening, 75% of us, including myself, I'm planning to do this right away, to work with the Burlsworth Foundation, to work with Marty and Vicki, to see what impact that I can have through my optometrist. We're not talking about a lot of money here, but we're talking about incredible impact for those less fortunate that don't have the ability to have some of these things like basic eye care. And what a great way to kind of summarize Brandon's legacy. When I think about Brandon, the first thing I think about is seeing, just visually seeing this hulk of a man, a hulk of a human being wearing these black rim glasses and just kind of standing proud is really awesome. So you have our commitment, and we'll for all the listeners that we have, I'd ask you to just join us in helping this foundation. Again, it's the BrandonBurlsworth.org. You can find out more information. Rachel will put it in the show notes. So I'd like to just recap and summarize. Marty and Vicki, thank you so much for just sharing your thoughts of this incredible human being who graced this earth for such a little period of time, but yet we're still talking about him 20 years later. the greatest walk-on in college football history. The Burlsworth Trophy named after him, a two-time All-SEC, first-team All-American, third-round NFL draft choice. But most important, just an incredibly faithful and incredible human being, and a servant in not his words, but his actions to all those around him. I'll never forget the story. I thank you so much for being a part of our podcast today. And we just wish you nothing but blessings for this foundation.
Thank you, John. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to share Brandon's story, because we think it's powerful, and it's our passion to do that.
Amen. Amen. Go Razorbacks.
Go Hogs.
Go Hogs.